Benny Bear and Ruby Rabbit and the Missing Muffins. It was a bright, breezy morning in Pinecone Forest, and Benny Bear's kitchen smelled like heaven. He had spent all morning baking a fresh batch of his famous blueberry honey muffins for the annual forest picnic. "These are my best batch yet," Benny said proudly, placing the golden muffins on a cooling rack. "Right, Ruby?" Ruby Rabbit popped her head through the window. "They smell amazing, Benny. Are they cool enough to taste?" "Not yet," Benny chuckled. "I need them perfect for the picnic this afternoon." Ruby licked her lips. "Don't worry, I'll guard them like a hawk." But the moment Benny stepped out to gather his picnic blanket, Ruby got distracted by a butterfly fluttering past the window. "Ooh," she murmured, hopping after it. By the time Benny returned, the muffins were gone. "All 12?" Benny gasped, staring at the empty tray. "They were right here." Ruby dashed back in. "What? They vanished? I was only gone for... okay, maybe 5 minutes." Benny looked under the table. Ruby sniffed the counter. "They didn't just get up and walk away," she said. Benny narrowed his eyes. "This sounds like a mystery." Ruby grinned. "Then it's time for Detective Rabbit and Deputy Bear." She pulled a magnifying glass from her backpack. She always carried one, just in case, and Benny put on his most serious expression. "Let's look for clues," said Ruby. They examined the windowsill. "Look!" Benny pointed. "A trail of crumbs." The trail led out the door, across the grass, and straight into the forest. The two friends followed the trail carefully, right past Mrs. Mole's flower bed and under the wobbly bridge near the blackberry bush. Suddenly, Ruby stopped. "Shh! Do you hear that?" They crouched behind a tree and listened. A faint giggling and munching sound came from the clearing ahead. Peeking around the tree, they saw a group of tiny chipmunks sitting in a circle, blueberry muffin crumbs all over their paws and faces. One of them saw Benny and squeaked, "Uh-oh!" The chipmunks froze. "Deputy Bear," said Ruby sternly, "I believe we've found our muffin nibblers." "But we didn't mean to take them," said the tiniest chipmunk. "We thought they were for the picnic and, well, they just smelled so good." Benny crossed his big furry arms. "You should have asked first." The chipmunks looked down. "We're sorry." Ruby's ears perked up. "Wait a minute. There are only 6 muffins here. What happened to the rest?" One chipmunk pointed. "We gave some to Marvin Mouse down the path." "Then the muffin trail continues," cried Ruby. The detectives followed the new trail, which led through the cattail marsh and into a little hollow log. There Marvin Mouse was having a tea party with 2 bluebirds and a frog. On the table were 3 half-eaten muffins. "Oh," Marvin said sheepishly, "we didn't know they were your muffins." Ruby tapped her foot. "Marvin, Marvin, Marvin." "But they're so delicious," said one of the bluebirds. "Can we have the recipe?" Benny sighed and scratched his head. "Well, I did make them for the picnic." Ruby grinned. "And technically the picnic hasn't started yet." Benny chuckled. "That's true. But now we don't have any muffins left for everyone else." The chipmunks and Marvin looked at each other. Then the tiniest one said, "We can help make more." "Really?" Benny asked. "Sure, we'll gather more berries, and Marvin has extra honey." "Then it's time for a baking party," Ruby declared. Back at Benny's kitchen, animals from all over the forest helped mix, measure, and stir. Some chopped berries, others poured honey, and a few, including Benny, taste-tested just to make sure. By the time the sun reached its peak, they had 24 muffins, more than ever before. At the picnic, everyone gathered on checkered blankets, laughing, playing games, and munching happily on the fresh-baked treats. Benny raised his paw. "I declare these the community muffins, because it took a whole forest to make them." "And a great team of detectives to solve the case," Ruby added with a wink. The animals cheered, and as music filled the meadow and the sweet smell of muffins hung in the air, Benny leaned over to Ruby and whispered, "Best mystery ever." Ruby smiled, "Especially when it ends with muffins." Benny Bear and Ruby Rabbit and the Secret Map. It was a lazy afternoon in Pinecone Forest. and Benny Bear was cleaning out his attic. Dusty boxes, old honey pots, and forgotten toys were stacked high around him. He sneezed and laughed. This place could use a little organising. Suddenly he spotted a rolled-up scroll tied with a faded red ribbon. "What's this?" Benny murmured, blowing off the dust. He unrolled it, and his eyes widened. It was a hand-drawn map with a big red X near something labelled Whistle Rock. At the top, in loopy writing, it read, "To those who seek adventure and treasure shall they meet." Benny gasped. A treasure map! He rushed down the stairs and bounded out the door straight to Ruby Rabbit's burrow. "Ruby," he shouted, "you're not going to believe this." Ruby popped up from her garden with a carrot in her mouth. "Treasure map?" she asked before he could even speak. Benny held it out. "How did you know?" "You've got your adventure face on," she grinned. "Let's pack snacks and head for Whistle Rock." They filled a backpack with trail mix, a compass, and a flashlight, just in case, then set off down the winding forest path. The map showed 3 landmarks: Crooked Tree, Echo Hollow, and finally, Whistle Rock. First stop, Crooked Tree. It wasn't hard to find. It bent sideways like it was trying to touch its toes. Ruby hopped up and tapped the trunk. "What's next?" Benny pointed to the next mark. "We follow the stream past Echo Hollow." As they walked beside the babbling brook, they sang songs and skipped stones. Soon they reached a quiet clearing surrounded by tall, mossy trees. Every sound echoed back, twice. "Hello!" shouted Ruby. "Hello!" echoed the trees. "Ruby's the best! Ruby's the best!" Benny laughed. Okay. Back to the treasure." After crossing a wobbly log bridge and tiptoeing through a patch of mushrooms, they finally reached Whistle Rock. It was a tall, narrow stone that whistled softly whenever the wind blew through a small hole near the top. Ruby checked the map. "The X is right here." They looked around. No treasure chest, no sparkling gems, just grass and stones. Benny frowned. "Maybe we read it wrong." Then Ruby spotted something. "Hey, look! That tree stump looks newer than the rest." They both knelt beside it. Benny brushed away leaves and dirt, revealing a small wooden trapdoor. With a creak, they opened it. Inside was a tin box tied with twine. They opened it slowly. Inside was a smooth stone painted gold, a feather pen, and a folded note. Ruby read aloud. "To future adventurers, the real treasure is the journey you take and the friends you take it with. If you've found this, pass it on, add your own treasure and hide it again." The Woodland Wanderers. Benny smiled. "It's a friendship treasure." Ruby held up the pen. "Let's leave a note too." They wrote, "Benny and Ruby were here. We found adventure, laughter, and the best snacks ever. Your turn next." Then Ruby added one of her shiny marbles, and Benny placed a honey candy wrapped in wax paper. They buried the box again and covered it carefully, just like they found it. As they walked home under the orange glow of the setting sun, Ruby said, "We didn't find gold or jewels, but this was one of my favourite days ever." Benny nodded. "It was a treasure, and maybe someday someone else will find it too." Ruby grinned. "And when they do, they'll know Benny Bear and Ruby Rabbit were here first." They high-pawed and headed back towards the forest trail, already wondering where the next adventure might take them. Benny Bear and Ruby Rabbit and the Great Forest Race. The sun rose early over Pinecone Forest, casting golden rays across the meadow. Benny Bear stretched on his porch and sniffed the fresh morning air. Just then, a blur of white fur zoomed past him. "Ruby?" he called. Ruby Rabbit skidded to a stop, her ears flapping and a flyer clutched in her paw. "Benny!" she cried. "It's today! The Great Forest Race!" Benny blinked. "Race?" "Yes, the one that goes from Owl Hollow to Maple Creek. There are ribbons and snacks and everything, and we're entering." Benny scratched his head. "Ruby, I'm not exactly fast." Ruby grinned. "That's okay, we're entering the team relay. You run the forest trail, I hop the meadow, and then we paddle the creek together." "Paddle?" Benny repeated, now wide-eyed. "Yup, I borrowed a canoe from Freddy Frog. Come on, we've got to register." At the check-in table, Granny Owl handed them race bibs and pointed towards the crowd of animals warming up. "Starts at the hollow. First team to reach Maple Creek wins the Blueberry Trophy." Ruby hopped in place full of energy. Benny did some slow bear stretches. "Don't worry," Ruby whispered, patting his arm. "We're not in it to win. We're in it for the fun." The whistle blew, and the race began. Benny was first. He lumbered through the winding forest trail, dodging roots and low branches. Squirrels zipped past him, and even a porcupine trotted by. But Benny kept going, huffing and puffing, his paws thudding against the earth. He passed a tired turtle, helped a hedgehog over a log, and reached the clearing where Ruby was waiting. "Tag," he said, panting. Ruby shot off like a rocket across the sunny meadow. She zoomed past raccoons, leapt over bushes, and waved at cheering birds. At the far end of the meadow, she reached the creek where their canoe waited. Benny arrived moments later, still catching his breath. They pushed off together, paddling through the sparkling water as dragonflies zipped past. All around them, other animal teams splashed and paddled, some in canoes, some on lily pads, and one mouse team riding a floating walnut shell. Ruby steered while Benny provided the power. "We're actually doing pretty well," Benny said. But then, splash. A gust of wind tipped their canoes sideways. Ruby squealed. Benny grabbed the sides. They didn't tip over, but their paddles floated away. "Oh no," cried Ruby. "Wait," said Benny, rummaging in the snack bag. "I have an idea." He pulled out 2 big wooden spoons. "Let's spoon paddle." They dipped the spoons into the water, laughing the whole way. It wasn't fast, but it worked. By the time they reached the finish line, most of the crowd was already there, cheering and eating pie. The winners, a pair of chipmunks, were holding the Blueberry Trophy high. Ruby and Benny paddled up to the shore, wet and grinning. Granny Owl met them with a warm smile. "You may not have come first, but you showed great spirit, and your spoon paddles were very clever." Benny laughed. "We call it bear-rabbit engineering." Just then, one of the younger racers, a little fox cub, tugged Ruby's paw. "I got scared in the meadow and wanted to quit, but when I saw you two laughing in your canoe, I decided to keep going." Ruby's heart melted. "That's the real prize." Granny Owl agreed. "In fact, we have a special award for most cheerful team." She handed them a ribbon with glittery letters and a little wooden spoon glued to it. Benny chuckled. "Best ribbon I've ever earned." Later, they sat on a picnic blanket eating blueberry pie with the other racers. The air was full of laughter, music, and fireflies. Ruby leaned back against Benny's big, fluffy shoulder. "That was one of the best races ever." Benny nodded. "Especially since we didn't sink." They both laughed, knowing that in every race the real victory was the fun they had together and the memories they made.